Hello everyone and welcome to another video in the Excel to SQL series that we have been doing on this channel. So in the previous videos we have now covered quite some ground on the basics of SQL and how to write simple queries and how to do some more data manipulation and varieties of filtering and things like that, right? So today we are going to look at another concept which is called the lead and the lag keywords. Okay, so we are going to be seeing shortly what those are, but essentially the main concept here will be to help us get previous values or the next values for any given dimension definition, right? So if you're saying day over day, right? So let's say you have a day over day data set and you have today's data in the row, but on the cell beside it, right, on the column beside it, you have the yesterday's data, right? So instead of having everything in the same column, you have it side by side, by which now you can calculate the variance, right? Okay, between previous day sales and today's sales, or between previous days previous week sales and today's sales. So you can see a week over week variance depending on the dimension definition that you're giving. Okay, so this can also be asked in interviews where you have to compare, you have to give a different variation and you have to give the analysis or something like that, right? So these keywords can really help you with that. Okay, so before we get started, I would all request you to please subscribe to the channel as we have a lot of data content coming your way. We're going to be talking about data analysis, data wrangling, and fundamental things that gets applied everywhere. All right, so let's continue and let's go to the pivot table that we have over here. All right, so this is the pivot table that we have, and what I have done here is I have added invoice date, sales method, and sum of units sold. Okay, so these three elements are there in my pivot table. Now if you see here, I've also added a filter for in store. Okay, actually we will get to adding more than one in just a while, but essentially what we are going to be doing today is what I will be showing you over here. So we have two keywords, one is the lead, okay, and the other is the lag, but I'm not going to put it there, I'm just going to replace this afterwards, right? All right, so what happens in the lead key? In the lead key, what happens is you will put the next value of units sold. In this case, I've put units sold. I don't have total sales in this. So I want to put the number of units sold for a given definition, right? So in this case, I have one dimension. Okay, of course, we do have the date here as well, but that's going to be considered in a different way. But we also have the main dimension as in store. Okay, so what we're trying to do is I'm trying to bring the next values for these side by side. So what does that mean? So for example, now 1/1/2020 in store, the sales is 1200. Okay, now 1/2/2020 in store and 1000. So this is the next value as per the definition of the dimension and the date. Okay, so if they are in the same column, then it becomes very tricky to do calculations, right? Compare them and see the difference, see the variance and things like that, right? So ideally you would want to get this value here. Okay, so this is exactly what the lead keyword in SQL does. Okay, it gets the next value defined by the definition of the metrics. Okay, so which means for the next day 1/1/12 in store, the value is 1000 and I bring it over here. Similarly, 1/2 in store, the value is 1000. The next value 1/3 in store is also 1000, right? So that comes here. Okay, same way the next value for this row, the next value is 850, so that comes here. This is the 900 next value, that comes here. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you're getting the next value essentially over here. So if you want to do it as a formula, then you're just going to refer to the next value. So in this case, I'm going to refer C8, right? And I'm just going to drag this. So I'm going to get the next value of everything. So even here, if you see, we've ended till 1/7, and then after that you get the February values for in store, correct? So you get those values coming in over here. All right, so that is about lead. And if you have to do a lag is nothing but the other way around. The lag is for the previous value. In this case we were taking the next value, whereas in lag you're going to be taking the previous value. Okay, so if we just get rid of this and do the same exercise again, so 1/1/2020 in store 1200 units, but do we have a previous value? We do not have a previous value because this is the first value on this table, so this will become a null. Okay, it's going to be a blank. Let's look at the next one. 1/2/2020 in store, the value is 1000, but what's the previous value? 1200, right? So I get that over here. Okay, same way 1300 in store, it's 1000 again, so but the previous value is 1000. Okay, 14850, the value is 1000. 850 for 900, the previous value is 850, and so on. Okay, so essentially I'm going to take the previous cell value, right? So in this case it will be C7, and in the same fashion I'm going to drag it. Alright, so this is what the lag value does. Now depending on the nature of your requirement, right, whether you want to compare the past or the future values, right, you will have to use the lead and the lag keywords accordingly. Okay, but now we have only one dimension over here, so it is very straightforward to see, okay, which is the value and all those things, right? But what if I were to add another dimension? So let's say first of all let's increase this. Okay, let's make another value outlet. Okay, there you go. Now in this case the definition will change, right? Because if you see here, you have two values for 120, right? You have 1200 and you have a 742. Okay, and the dimension that you're breaking it out is by the sales method itself. However, in the previous case we had one value, but we're going to have now two values. So now when you do this exercise, let's say if you're doing for lead, okay, if you're doing the lead exercise here, 1/1/2020 in store 1200. So what's the next value then? The next value is going to be this 1/2/2020 in store 1000, right? So it's going to be 1000. 1/1/2020 outlet 742, but what's the next value for outlet? 928. Same way in store 1000, the next value is 1000. 1/2 outlet 928, what's the next value for outlet? 935. Oh, sorry, this should be here. Alright, and so on and so forth. So you see the value that comes in the new column, which you will create with the lead keyword, is going to change because now the value of the dimension, the value of the label is what is going to determine what value should come over here. And it should make sense. Why? Because if you are comparing it by the sales method to see where the variance is higher, is the variance for sum of units sold on a day-to-day basis higher in in-store or in outlet, right? So that's what you're trying to determine, and that's where you can see the comparison of the variances. Okay, it may not be the best way to compare it on an overall basis, but you can use this to build the table first on a day-to-day basis and then modify it in a later stage. For that you will have to use something called as CTs, which we will cover in a separate video. All right. So that's essentially the concept of lead and lag. Similarly, if I add another dimension now, let's say I'll add another dimension. Okay, so we can probably use city. Oh, it's going to replace this table over here, no problem. All right, so in this case as well, right, now when you look at this when you have more than one dimension, right, you will have to specify whether you want to do it by this or by this or by both of them. Okay, for example, now we did the in-store by in-store and outlet definition, right? So in-store, it is the next value is 1000. What's the next value? 1000, right? If you're doing a lead again in this case, so the next value, which is in-store 1/1/2020, is 1000. Okay, similarly in-store, again in-store, if you come here to the next value, it is 1000. I'm only doing for in-store in this case, just to save time. So 850. So when you do this, you're defining it only by the outlet. But if you have to define by this and this, okay, in that case also this actually works. Why? Because in-store New York 1/1/2020 is 1000. Which is the next in-store value? In-store New York, again 1000. In-store New York, that's 850. In-store New York, so on and so forth, right? So it's going to define that value in that fashion. Okay, it is going to be dependent on both of these. Okay, so depending on how you want to partition it, or how do you, now in this case you're doing a partition by, okay, which we are going to see how to write this, but essentially you're defining how do you want the value to come here, on what basis. Is it going to be just on sales method, or is it going to be on city, or any other number of dimensions that are there. Okay, so because accordingly the value of the definition of this value will change depending on the number of dimensions that you add. Okay, and hence you will have to define how you want this to be broken. Okay, so whatever concept we've just discussed over here about lead, okay, where we are saying, okay, we want the next value based on the definition, the next value of in store for New York should come beside here. Okay, and for next value of outlet should come here, so on and so forth, right? So in lead it's the next value that is in the table, and for lag it's the previous value that's in the table. Okay, in some cases, like in the initial case when we did a lag over here, when we did a lag, this was supposed to be blank. Why? Because you do not have a previous value. And there are many instances that can happen not just in the first value, even in the values afterwards, because let's say there was no sales in outlet and suddenly one pops up in the middle, right? So you're not going to have a previous value. So that first value will be first value here, and then after that you will start seeing some values. Okay, so that's also very likely to happen when you do a scenario of a lag, because there was no previous value. So that can be in the beginning or in the middle. Alright, so let's just start replicating this in the SQL table and see how this looks like. Okay, so I have these queries written over here ready, but we are going to look at how these things are written. Okay, so let's kind of replicate this table. So we have invoice date, sales method, city. Okay, so I'm just going to go with invoice date, sales method, and sum of units sold to start with. However, in this case what I'm actually going to do is I am not going to take sum of units sold, because that's because in this case if I have to do that, I will have to do it in a different way using CTEs. Okay, so I'm just going to take it as units sold. So invoice date, sales method, units sold. So I'm just going to remove this statement first, and just do it like this, right? So you can see here what I've done is it's all come by date, store, and this one. Okay, and you can see the same 1200 1000 values coming over here. Okay, and I'm just going to keep for one value here is equal to, let's say, outlet. Okay, so essentially select invoice date, sales method, unit sales from the table name where sales method is equal to outlet, and I'm sorted it by the invoice date. Okay, now how do we write a lag over here is what we need to write a lead and a lag both. Okay, so we will explore that in separate context, but let's look at lead first. Okay, let's get the next value on the side. Okay, so this is going to come in the select statement, okay, like the others. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to indent this a little bit. Yeah, this is going to help us see this because it's going to be a little long. Okay, so I have invoice date, I have sales method, and I have unit sold, and I'm going to be using the lead keyword. Now the way to write this is you have the lead, and inside this you're going to write the metric, right? The metric that you want the next number to come beside the column. Okay, so in this case what I've done is I'm going to take unit sold, obviously, right? But I'm going to put it beside unit sold. Why? Because we can look at the numbers side by side. Okay, so it's going to be lead units sold. Okay, now we discussed earlier that this number over here is defined by the dimensions that you have, correct? So if you're going to define it by just the sales method, then it's going to go by the sales method. If you're going to define it by both sales method and city, then it's going to go by that, correct? So we established that ground rule over here, but how are we going to define it in the SQL world, right? So to do this we have to use some more keywords. So lead, you have lead unit sold over, okay, which is what we are saying that we want to use this over what dimension. So that is where this definition is going to come in place. We're going to use this inside a bracket. Okay, so it's lead units sold over, and then I'm going to write partition by. So partition by is how we are going to define the dimension over which we want the next number to come. Okay, so lead unit sold over partition by, and in this case it's going to be the sales method, right? And then if you want to order it, you have to do order by, and then in this case we're ordering it by the date, so I'm going to specify it as invoice date. Okay, so first you would write the lead, then you'll write this over, and then inside this over you're going to write the partition by what is the dimension or dimensions, and then how do you want the data to be sorted by. And in this case the order by that you're doing over here is the sorting of the what do you call, sorting of the new values, right? So if you don't it's how the data is getting sorted and how the next values or the previous values come by. Now because we have used an order by over here, so it's going to come very neatly. But yeah, it's always good to have this in place so that you know that you're going to be getting the correct next value or the previous value. Okay, so this is the entire lead statement that's there, and I can alias this as well, so I can say next value. Let's just put this as next value. Okay, so that's done. So we don't have anything else, we don't have anything special to do over here, so I'm just going to run this quickly, and now you can see outlet, right, 275, the next value 384 has come here, this next value has come here, this next value has come here, this next value has come here, and so on and so forth, right? So this is exactly what we have been trying to do over here, right? Now in the same fashion, the same thing will apply to lag as well. Okay, I just need to change this from lead to lag. So both are written in the same way in the syntax. What matters is what you need. Do you need the previous value or the next value? And based on that, you will use either the lead or the lag. Okay, so I'm just going to run this. And now you can see the first value is a null because there's no previous value, right? The second instance 384, the previous value is 275. Third instance is 83, previous value is 384. 158, 83, 320, 158, 450, 320, and so on. Okay, so now we're going to look at what happens when another dimension is added along with the existing dimension. Okay, so all this while we saw the unit sold and the lead and lag value as per the sales method as a dimension. Okay, but now as we did over here, right, we added one more dimension here. So now the definition of the number changes. Okay, it's not going to be just based on sales method, but it's also going to be based on city. So how are we going to write this? Now let's add that dimension here so that we have what we need. Okay, so if I have written city over here, now I have for sales method and city. Okay, if you see the lead function, we have not made any changes here. Okay, we've kept as is from the previous ask. And now if you see invoice date, outlet, Philadelphia 275, and the next value is 384. Okay, so 001 outlet New York 384, and that's the next value. Okay, but I don't think that's right, because when we did 275, 384 and so on, this was based on invoice date and sales method. Okay, but if you were to add the next dimension, which is for 1st January outlet Philadelphia, okay, your next value should actually be 83 and not 384, correct? Because you are considering all three dimensions and you're getting the next value. Alright, so whenever you have more than one dimension, depending on the table that you're creating, you will encounter this confusion. What should be the next value? Okay, now that depends on the ask that you are being given. Okay, if you are asked that okay by sales method and by invoice, and especially if your sales method is outlet or let's say a single value, okay, then yes, it makes sense. Okay, but let's remove this filter. Let's just remove this filter for simplicity's sake. And if you see now our outlets, now our dimension has changed because now we have all the other two values as well. So we have 11 online New York 336 and 11 online Philadelphia 83, which is not right, because the next value should be what defines this. So 11 online New York, it should be somewhere, right? 11 online New York. What's the next value? Do we have a next value? Yeah, we have. So this is 384. So this 384 should come over here instead. Okay, instead it is going by the date and by this. Okay, so to change this, you need to mention it inside the partition method. Okay, so if you write this by city, if you write this just by city instead of the sales method, okay, now what's going to happen is your next value or your previous value, depending on whether this is lead or lag, will depend on the city, right? So if the first value for New York is 384, the second value is 1200, and that's coming 1200, 336, 336, and so on. But this is only based on the city values, right? Whatever is the next value for the given city, you are conveniently ignoring the date and the sales method. So which is why you need to put both the dimensions here. So when you do that, sales underscore method and city. Now when you do this, you can see January 1st in store New York is 1200 and the next value is showing 1000. Okay, so where is that 1000? Here. So 1, 2 in store and New York, the next value is 1000. Same way the next value after that is also 1000, because if you see 1, 3 in store New York, 1000. Okay, and the next value is showing 850, so we'll look for that as well. That is in store New York, right? So let's come here. Yeah, in store New York 850, right? So now it is defining as per all the three dimensions, and this makes much more sense than the earlier one, because that is only being taken by a single dimension, either it's a sales method or the city. Whereas here you see that we have ordered this by the invoice date, and accordingly things are getting stacked up, and you're getting the previous value, the next value or the previous value, depending on whether this is lead or lag. All right. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you can use this in your day-to-day work, and a lot of interview questions come around this concept of comparing previous value versus current value. So that is where this lead and lag functions can really help you stand out in terms of being able to answer the questions, or at least being able to explain the approaches. Okay. Now the one thing that you might wonder is that we have not looked at any aggregate functions over here. Okay, I just took the value of units sold as is, and we have seen the different variations around which this function works. However, we haven't seen anything where I've added an aggregate function and I've done things over here. Okay, so for an aggregate function, we need to create first a view. We need to create a temporary view, a temporary table first, and then from that table we need to do this operation of lead or lag. Okay, so for example, if you're doing it by sum of units sold, okay, then I have to create a table with the aggregated sum of units sold based on the dimensions, and then on that new table is where I have to do the ranking. So for this we need to learn a concept called CTE, which is common table expressions, which I will do in a separate video, and once I cover that video, then I might revisit this topic with aggregate functions into the picture. All right, so please do like this video, please do comment and let me know what you thought of this video and what other kind of videos I should make on this channel, and please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. I'll be coming up with more data related content over here for a lot of the professionals who are using a lot of spreadsheets even today. So that would be definitely be useful for you to use this knowledge and pivot to other tools as and when the requirement arises. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.